Get Paul George in a Pelicans uniform. I've got a blockbuster trade that pairs PG-13 and Zion Williamson. Little crazy? Yeah, that's why it works. And there's a contingency plan if it fails. It's Trade Target Thursday on today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday, Trade Target Thursday. And we are looking at Paul freaking George. Y'all, that was probably a name you weren't expecting. There's a lot of it's so stupid, it's smart logic behind it. We're going to have a fun show here. You can look at the little sideboard if you're on YouTube and see where we might be going with this one. Blockbuster trade, but here's the thing. If it doesn't work out, it'll be okay because we have a plan for that. There is kind of like a fail-safe, a contingency plan built into this kind of trade, which is what makes this maybe work. And then we'll look at James Borrego and his rumored links to the Lakers and Cavaliers still. Where is he going to end up? What's it mean for the Pelicans going forward too? And of course, thank you for making today's episode of Locked On Pelicans your first listen. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast. We are here every single day. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Let's get right into it. The trade. I'm not going to make you wait. Paul George blockbuster trade here. There's kind of two variations of this. But this trade sees Paul George coming to the New Orleans Pelicans, Zubac coming to the New Orleans Pelicans too, and this is where we're getting a little crazy, Russell Westbrook as well. And we're sending out Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. You could even have the Clippers include, in my opinion, a pick coming back to the Pelicans, or even two in this deal. But sending out Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum for Ivica Zubac, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook. Probably should have put Russell Westbrook first there. It sounds kind of wild, but we're going to get into some of the details on this and why I think this trade works. So a couple of things first. Paul George has a player option for next season for about $48 million, a little bit over, almost $49 million. He could become a free agent. So let's assume that he's picking up the player option for the sake of this trade. Zubac is on 1 year, $11.7 million, so he's an expiring deal. Russell Westbrook is on 1 year and $4 million remaining. So they're all basically on 1 year deals. And oddly, I'm okay with that. More on that in the next segment here. In theory, you could have Paul George do a bit of an extended trade, but I would do a 2-year extension with the second year being a player option. So it's really a 1 year deal. So you have him for 2 more guaranteed years left and then a player option at the end. So he'd pick up this option, add 1 guaranteed year, and then a player option after that. That's the trade. I think you could maybe take out Westbrook and put in someone like Norm Powell. More on that in the next segment. But this trade saves the Pelicans about $5 million, 4.7, giving them a little bit more wiggle room to make other moves this summer. And I think that's kind of key. I think then you roll into this season with kind of a crazy starting lineup of Herb Jones, Trae Young, Paul George, Zion Williamson, and Zubac as your center with Russell Westbrook, your point guard, off the bench. So Paul George is 34 years old. He'll be 35 next season. That's kind of scary trading for that kind of player when you're sending out, Brandon Ingram, who is not 34 years old. But Paul George is still a massively productive player and still very, very good. And while he has had some health and injury issues, Brandon Ingram will be 27 next season, right? There's a big age gap between those two. But Paul George played 74 games last season, averaged 22.6 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists. This is a guy that still has it. 1.2 steals. He's been an all-star the past 2 years. He's still a very, very good defender. Maybe most importantly, he takes threes and he makes threes. This is someone who over the past couple of years from his tenure in OKC and the Clippers, so this is the past 7 seasons, is averaging 8.2 threes per game and making them at a 40% rate. You need that kind of shooting around Zion Williamson along with defense. So you're going to have Herb Jones, who can make threes and handle the ball a little bit in the starting lineup. Trey, who's a three-point shooting threat. And Paul George, who's a bit of a playmaker. He can handle the ball too and shoot the three and defend and rebound. Zion being point Zion, your essential point guard when it comes to this sort of thing. And then Zubac, who's just like a solid, serviceable center. They can give you a little bit of rim protection, rim running, though he's not a court spacer. But you have 3 shooters out there on the court now. I don't know. It's a little wacky. It's a little bit crazy. You don't really have a guard per se in that lineup, but that lineup's big. There's a lot of length there. Is Herb Jones the shortest guy? Is Zion the shortest guy? At that point then with everything, that kind of sounds fun to me when it comes to that sort of thing. Herb Jones is 6'8". Paul George is 6'8". Is that what he is? He's 6'8". I mean, Zubac is a center, right? Trey Murphy is like 6'9", 6'10". Zion's probably the shortest person in that starting lineup at 6'6". So you have size. I think the defense can still be pretty good with the guys out there on the court. You just worry about some of the ball handling, and you're kind of preying on Zion Williamson staying healthy. But you're going to do that no matter what. If Zion goes down, no matter what trade you make, this team isn't going to be nearly as good. It's just as simple as that, right? Like, we know that. Now, maybe that's a little bit scary to bank on Zion's health, but he kind of proved it last year, minus just an unfortunate, hamstring injury during that play-in tournament game. I don't know. This sounds pretty fun to me overall, and I think it's a big shakeup. And it does have potential to fail, but that's okay. Now, you also have Russell Westbrook, your point guard off the bench. They tried to scapegoat him at the end of last season, which I didn't particularly like with the Los Angeles Clippers. Like, he was far from the problem there. And I think it wasn't right. He has largely been a very good teammate for the Los Angeles Clippers the past couple of years. Whether they ask him to start, whether they ask him to come off the bench, he's done a very good job of just kind of fitting in with the team. Last year, 68 games, 11 starts, right? So largely coming off the bench. 11 points per game, 4.5 assists, 5 rebounds. He doesn't shoot threes, right? But he does still get to the line at a decent rate for the minutes that he plays, for the role that he has. I like that from him. And I think that's the type of player that this team could still really use. You still also have Paul George, who's capable of getting to the line. He doesn't do it nearly like he used to. Let's say it's kind of gone down the past couple of years, but he's an excellent free throw shooter. So him, Zion, everyone kind of doing their thing. Crazy, right? But seems like there's something there. This clears. Well, that's the big part of this too, right? Say it fails. Say this doesn't work out. I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally fine if this just blows up, because we've set up a situation where you're going to be okay. So say it doesn't work. We fall flat on our face here. The Pelicans are bad, right? Cool. Trade everyone. Start over. And the Pelicans are in tremendous position to do that after this deal. So you have a contingency plan if it fails. Let's look at that. The extreme case. It is extreme. I will give you that. We're going to talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. It's the NBA Finals. Maybe you just want to fly to Dallas like Rel Myers, who just did that. I wonder if she got her tickets to the game on Game Time. By the way, she just texted me a picture from being outside the arena. Finals. It'd be really cool to go to a game. Game Time can make that happen for you, because as you get closer to the event, you can buy your tickets from there, right? What I love about Game Time, and this is my go-to ticketing app, is they just take the uncertainty, the questions about buying tickets out. I've never been to a game in Dallas. I wouldn't know where to sit. Game Time has views from the seats, so you're getting the angle, the seats that you want. You're not going to have something obstructing your view. Maybe it's like too steep, something like that. No, you're going to know exactly what you're buying. They also just have great deals all the time. And as you get closer to the event, maybe the ticket prices drop. Game Time can save you up to 60% off buying tickets at the last minute. Plus, they have all-in pricing up front, so you know what you're paying, no surprise fees at checkout, and then they have the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section in row for less. So buy early, buy late, you're going to get the best price no matter what with Game Time. Peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you with probably a show you didn't think today. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. It's mandatory minicamp for the Saints. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, is there giving you the boots on the ground coverage, telling you everything you want. He's been texting me about it and all of that stuff. So if you want to know everything going on with the black and gold, Derek Carr looking good, getting me kind of hyped for the season. Ross Jackson has you covered. Make him your second listen today. So we just went over a wild blockbuster trade. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum to the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George, Zubac, and Russell Westbrook coming back to the New Orleans Pelicans. You could maybe swap out Russell Westbrook for Norm Powell if you just kind of want a better score, someone who's probably a little bit more reliable, more size. That's fine. That adds about $10 million to the Pelicans salary cap. That scares me a little bit in this situation. That's putting them a little bit out of that flexibility range to make other moves. But, I think you get that deal done with him. The main pieces are BI, CJ, and Paul George. But what this does is, so I forgot to mention this in the last segment. So before the blow it up part, one of the things about Paul George too is he's kind of clutch. He's kind of clutch. That was something the Pelicans struggled with, closing games. Paul George had 32 clutch games. That's where the score is within 5. Either way, you're either up by 5 or fewer or you're down by 5 or fewer. And there's less than 5 minutes to go in the game. Paul George shot 48.7% from the field this past season in clutch minutes. That is 19 of 39. He was 8 for 20 from 3, 40%. That number's great. And also in those 20 games, he got to the line in clutch minutes 32 times, making 30 of his free throws. 94%. 5 rebounds, 6 assists, just 5 turnovers, 2 blocks, and only 10 fouls in 20 games. Those are really good numbers, I think, for clutch crunch situations. Pelicans could use a guy like that. Now, has he shown up in the playoffs like we'd like? No, but let's get there first and then figure that sort of thing out. So he's a clutch player. Forgot to mention that in the last segment here. But say this doesn't work. It just, for whatever reason, the Zion pairing with Paul George ain't it. Russell Westbrook isn't giving what you want. Maybe you just don't have a point guard and that screws everything up. Say this completely blows up. Okay, it's time to blow up the team. Right? At this point, can you then actually build a team around Zion Williamson? So here's how we've set this up. Paul George, let's say we gave him an extension, the 2-year extension. So he picks up his player option for $49 million, and then it's a 2-year extension beyond that. So it's kind of a 3-year deal you're looking at remaining for him. So this next season, the year after that, then a player option. I think that is totally fine. One of my tabs here just went completely crazy because you then trade him and you just recoup something for him. You just trade him. Or even if you don't give him an extension, you just let him expire and you move on. Really as simple as that. You just move on, clear cap space. Same for Zubac, same for Westbrook. Norm Powell's 1 more year left on his deal. So if you need to get away from him, you can do that too. You can just let them all expire. All of a sudden, this team has tons of cap space now. And then you trade Zion Williamson. Get 3 first-round picks and a young player for him. I think that would be realistic. He's signed to a team-friendly deal. You want to move on from those guys sooner rather than later. Look at the trouble that they're running into with Brandon Ingram with kind of 1 year remaining on his contract. So You just clear the deck. You just completely clear the deck. This is what OKC did. So you become a cap team with a ton of draft picks and no expectations. This is what OKC did. It's an OKC style rebuild. They were the 1 seed this year. OKC was the 1 seed this year. They have a superstar player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have tons of cap space and tons of future first-round picks from other trades. They could swing a massive deal and sign a big-name free agent. I just saw a trade where they get Larry Markkinen. We'll talk about him next week. That's a great spot to be in. You're going to lose. It's not going to be fun. You're going to have to go through some sucky moments, but you are actually building with a plan. Maybe what the Pelicans should have done around Zion Williamson originally. What OKC did was you don't use that cap space to sign players. You rent it out. You take on bad contracts and you make teams attach future first-round picks with it. Trade us your player that you don't want. We'll put him into our cap space. We don't need to send you anything back. Just basically get him off your books. You give us 2 first-round picks to do that. That's how OKC has 50 first-round picks over the next couple of drafts. It's not that many. But you get what I'm saying. You rent the cap space out. You keep drafting until you land your superstar guy, and then you slowly, and then step on the gas and go. That's what OKC has done, and they can keep stepping on the gas. They got another gear to get to. That's what you do here. It clears your books and you trade Zion, and this team will be bad, and that's not fun. I want to watch winning basketball. Playoffs are fun. But at some point, you've got to do something like that if it's just not working with your current group. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Try with this group for another year. Make a big splashy trade for Paul George, and if it doesn't work out, you just clear it and just blow it completely up. Maybe that means David Griffin loses his job. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. You just got to do the right thing and blow it up and commit to that kind of style of tankiness only for a year or two. OKC was pushing for the postseason last year, right? They beat the Pelicans in the play-in tournament game, and then they were the 1 seed this year. That rebuild didn't last nearly as long as people were thinking it was, and they just made very smart decisions. And now look at that team with some of the guys they have. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, ironically for this show, was acquired in a trade with the Clippers for Paul George. So you bring Paul George here, it doesn't work out, you trade him, and you start another OKC-style rebuild, and there's some bookends on Paul George's career there and some symmetry. It's like a metaphor or a simile or I'm an English major, I should know that, right? There's something to be said for that guy leaving teams and starting a rebuild, I guess. And I think that's the move. It's not fun to think about trading some of these guys, blowing it up and starting over, but you're going to do that where, potentially next year's draft is good. If this doesn't work out this year, you blow it all up, get some picks in that draft, take some swings on guys. If one of them works out, perfect. You have your cornerstone to build around. Let them learn. Let them not have a pressure-filled environment for a little bit to just figure some things out. Bring in a young developmental coach, if that's the case, and go from there. Look at OKC. Yeah, they lost the Mavs. I think that series was a little fluky for OKC. They didn't shoot particularly well. The Mavs did. Maybe it comes down to something like that. And then they're going to be better next season. It feels like they have surpassed the Pelicans as that kind of young, up-and-coming team that everyone thinks is going to be really good. This is how you would get back to it. Might take 4 years. It's a long 4 years. And I wouldn't love covering a terrible, terrible, terrible team. But if it's the smart move and you see light at the end of the tunnel, that's what you do here. You lower ticket prices with that, which ownership won't like, but whatever, you've got to do it. And you get people on board with a long-term plan with a vision. That's how you do this. This trade gives you one big swing for next year in the Western Conference. One big swing gets Trey Murphy into the starting lineup too. Gives you star power. People will go and see a team with Paul George and Zion Williamson and Russell Westbrook off the bench. You have the flexibility to make another move or two, whether it's to bring in a point guard or someone else. You can do all of that for this team. And if you're good, you then just re-sign him. Say it works out. Cool. You re-sign Paul George, you give him more years. He'll stay and try and win. I don't think he particularly wants to be in New Orleans, but I think you could convince him if you're winning. I don't think he wanted to be in OKC, but he signed an extension there before they traded him. So he's at least willing to be in small markets. Westbrook will take whatever money you throw at him, especially if he's wanted. I think that matters to him. Zubac will be fine. You can re-sign him. And then you keep building around Zion, Trey, Herb, all those guys. And you just you're ready to go for like a 2-3 year window. That's what this would be before then it gets really, really expensive, but you're there. Paul George is an upgrade over Brandon Ingram. He's just older and there's durability concerns, but I think there's durability concerns out of both of them. So let me know what you think. Think about it as a 2 to 3 year plan here. Next year with the starting lineup of, as I said, kind of wacky, right? Herb, Trey, Paul George, Zion Williamson, Zubac, Westbrook off the bench, whoever you want off the bench, all of those things. And then say it works out, you re-sign everyone and you just go for it the next 2 years. And if it doesn't work out next year, blow it up, start over. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Coming up next, more James Borrego stuff. We're hearing other reports now that maybe it's to the Lakers, maybe it's to the Cavs. Let's break down what it means for the Pelicans, though. I don't care where he ends up. Let's say he's gone. What's it mean for New Orleans next? That's the important thing. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy, America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats for a shot to win up to 100 times. Think about that. 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds, and you just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you're locked in. And if you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has you covered every week. From lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. And the finals mean more on Prize Picks. So do the star players. You get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first time deposit match up to $100 when you use promo code LOCKEDONNBA after you download the Prize Picks app. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. A wild blockbuster trade. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum to the Clippers for Paul George, Zubac, and Russell Westbrook or Norm Powell. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. It's a little crazy. Like, it's a little nuts, but is it nuts in a good way? Crazy like a fox. I'm actually not sure. I just think it's a really interesting thought experiment with it. I don't even know if the Clippers would take an offer like that, though I imagine they would. It feels like they need to shake something up a little bit too, truly, even though I think they're just going to end up running everything back. But let's switch gears because we've heard James Borrego's name a lot. And yesterday we talked about him. It was that he's maybe the front runner for the Cavs job. Now maybe he's the front runner for the Lakers job. One of the things we talked about when I did the show about how the Lakers were embarrassed following the Dan Hurley thing, you then have to go back to these people and be like, yeah, we offered it to someone else and he turned us down. Do you still want it? And there's pride involved in this, and that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Like, okay, well, if you didn't want me in the first place, I'm not going to go to you. Here's the thing though. JJ Redick, Borrego, whoever they end up hiring, there's only 30 head coaching jobs in the world at the NBA level. That's it. There's 30 of them. Simple as that. When one gets offered to you, you almost always want to take it because you don't know when another one will get offered to you again. So even if that Lakers job isn't great, even if you're probably going to be scapegoated in a couple of years and then get fired, you're an NBA head coach. Only a select few people in the world are able to say that. And who knows what's going to happen again for you, right? Like maybe the Pelicans offense is bad next year and Borrego doesn't look as good. That stuff matters. So I do think that if they offer it to him or one of these two, he's going to take it, right? Even if, maybe both one is not a great job. So enough about that. Let's just assume he leaves because that's the assumption in the building right now. What next? What's that mean for the Pelicans? And I don't have assistant coach names for you. It's really tough to figure that stuff out, and who knows who they're looking at. And maybe they want to just promote within. Maybe they want to go get another name. And, there were some issues with Ingram, Borrego, and them kind of abandoning their offense and all that, and who's to blame, who's at fault, whatever. None of that matters right now. What I think this says, though, is something good about New Orleans and how they're developing coaches and what they're doing here. And I think that's something that's important to look at. That whoever, if they wanted to hire someone outside the organization, would be able to get a good, young, up-and-coming name or an elite assistant coach for this role. This is, when you look at some of the assistants and where they've gone on, this looks good. Teresa Witherspoon was let go by the team, but is now a head coach at the WNBA level. There's something to be said for that. We've had Jaron Collins be linked to the Pistons head coach opening and other head coach openings too. Teams are taking him seriously as a candidate, even if he hasn't gotten one of those jobs yet. He's kind of the defensive coordinator for the Pelicans here. That's someone that's well regarded around the league and teams would maybe want to poach. If Borrego goes from 1 year on the bench being the lead assistant to a head coach elsewhere, that looks really good. You even have someone like Ryan Pannoni who left to go to Alabama. It's college, but he's their lead assistant there on a team that just made, the Final Four with all of that. That's great stuff. So it can be a stepping stone job, but that's good. That's how you attract other talent, right? Look, I'm a big Tulane fan. Went to Tulane alum too. When they hired John Summerall to be the next head coach, one of the things that people have concerns about is he going to take an SEC job in 2 years? I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that because that means Tulane had really good success. And then he leaves and people are going to go like, wait. Willie Fritz went from Tulane to Houston, Power 5 job. Now you have Summerall going from Tulane to an SEC job. Well, if I want to be a big-time head coach, let me go there. If you're going to be poached, it means you're good. If people see that as a stepping stone job to a bigger job, yes, you'd like to be the bigger job. But if you're not that, and a lead assistant isn't necessarily that, if it gets you where you want to go, you go and take that job and you use it. And that means you're getting someone good. You're going to be able to hire kind of the cream of the crop because of that sort of thing. That's a great thing. I think that only makes this look more attractive. It makes the organization look like a solid organization because they are doing something right. It's like when you have employees, you want them to get promoted into better jobs. It makes you, your manager, look better. Yes, it sucks to lose that person. You've got to then fill it. The next person you hire might not be as good as your previous one. That's why you should use LinkedIn Jobs, by the way. And you use that, though, as your advantage. You want people to succeed and go and get what they want. And if you're building people up and then they go and take other roles, that says something about your organization in a very positive way. And I do think that stuff kind of matters. So Borrego leaving would hurt, but I think I want to say it's a good thing. It looks good. It reflects well on this organization and what they're doing and what head coach Willie Green is doing, even if we have gripes with him. That's why I'm not really panicking if Borrego leaves. It'll be fine. We wanted the offense to be different anyway, and he didn't really get to input his offense, so it's a little weird. But still, they'll be totally fine if he ends up leaving because whoever they put in that seat is probably going to be a quality coach because that is a job that I think will be somewhat coveted around the league a little bit as they start to talk to candidates once this maybe gets finalized a little bit. Maybe we'll hear something on that very soon. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, the Trade Target Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tell a friend about the show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Probably some more draft coverage tomorrow. I'm trying to line up a guest. We'll see if that ends up happening. If not, we'll look at what you want to hear. Maybe a lesson or two from the NBA Finals as well, because we're seeing some things with the Dallas Mavericks. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.